Welcome back. Time for a recap of LGBTQ plus news from across the country. California city that banned the pride flag poised to get powerful gay congressman. This news from The Advocate. A California city that banned the pride flag could soon be represented by a gay congressman. Huntington Beach, a conservative city in Southern California, will likely be represented in the next Congress by U.S. Representative Robert Garcia, the first out immigrant elected to Congress who could be one of the most powerful members next year. That's the result of a Democratic redraw of the Golden State's congressional boundaries that maximizes blue seats. Now, conservative officials in the city are complaining about the change. Since 2023, Huntington Beach officials have adopted a number of anti-LGBTQ plus policies. In addition to barring the display of the pride flag on city property, officials in the Orange County municipality have restricted access to some books with LGBTQ plus themes in public libraries. But city leaders see the new congressional map as Democrats imposing their own agenda. It's just California ugly-ass politics, and they are all about their agenda and not about the people. They don't care about the people of California one bit. Huntington Beach City Councilman Pat Burns told Reuters. California redrew its congressional lines in response to Texas, a solidly Republican-led state doing the same to boost GOP representation in the midterm elections. The moves have fueled broader multi-state effort to redraw congressional boundaries in both Republican and Democratic-controlled states. Notably, Huntington Beach is already represented by a Democrat, U.S. Representative Dave Min. But Garcia would present a much sharper ideological contrast to the proudly MAGA city, where residents regularly attend city council meetings to praise President Donald Trump. Garcia told Reuters that facing homophobia in public office is nothing new. The Peru-born lawmaker served as mayor of Long Beach before winning an election to Congress. I've represented people I don't agree with on everything my entire time as mayor, and currently as a member of Congress, Garcia told the wire service. That's okay. That's America. Garcia is not only one of the more liberal members of Congress, but also a member of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, the Congressional Hispanic Caucus, and the Equality Caucus, which he co-chairs. He's also the ranking Democrat on the House Oversight Committee, and if Democrats win back the House majority in the midterm elections, would play a leading role in investigations of the Trump administration. Garcia currently represents a district that leans more than 30 percentage points toward Democrats, according to Inside Elections. The newly configured 42nd Congressional District, however, is more competitive. Former Vice President Kamala Harris carried that district by roughly 13 percentage points in the 2024 presidential election. In other news, California families sue to stop the Trump Department of Justice from obtaining trans kids' records via Texas grand jury. A group of California families with transgender children is asking a federal court to block the Trump administration from obtaining confidential medical records through a Texas grand jury subpoena. The lawsuit filed Wednesday in the U.S. District Court for the Northern District of California challenges a subpoena issued by federal prosecutors in Texas seeking records from Lucille Packard Children's Hospital at Stanford. The families argue that the Department of Justice is attempting to accomplish through the criminal process what it has repeatedly failed to achieve through civil and administrative investigations, including access to the identities, diagnoses, treatment histories, and medical decisions of transgender youth and their families. The case comes just days after hospitals across the country disclosed that they had received criminal grand jury subpoenas from the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Northern District of Texas, seeking records related to gender-affirming care. Earlier this month, New York University Langone Health confirmed it had received such a subpoena, prompting protests from LGBTQ plus advocates and renewed concerns that the federal government was attempting to build a nationwide database of transgender patients, families, and providers. According to the complaint, the 6 California families learned about Stanford's subpoena only through public records about similar demands sent to other hospitals. They were never notified that federal prosecutors sought records containing their children's identities, diagnoses, treatment histories, and parental consent forms. The plaintiffs include parents of transgender children who received a range of care at Stanford, from counseling and psychological support to prescription medications. One family's child, according to the complaint, received only counseling and social support services. A detail the families argue demonstrates the breadth of the government's effort to obtain information about transgender youth, regardless of the type of care that they received. The lawsuit describes the subpoena as the latest step in a year-long federal effort that has repeatedly run into judicial resistance. According to the complaint, the Justice Department previously sought similar records through administrative subpoenas issued to hospitals across the country. Those efforts largely failed. The lawsuit states that at least 8 federal judges quashed or blocked the earlier subpoenas, with one court describing the government's stated rationale as a smokescreen, and another concluding prosecutors had issued the subpoenas first and searched for a justification second. Rather than accept those defeats, the families argue, federal prosecutors turned to a grand jury in Texas and obtained subpoenas seeking substantially the same information under the secrecy afforded to criminal investigations. The complaint notes that neither Stanford, the families involved, nor the care at issue has any apparent connection to Texas whatsoever. Yet prosecutors obtained the subpoena through a federal court there and set a June 10th deadline for the hospital to comply. Parents trust their children's doctors with the most sensitive information a family has. Shannon Minter, legal director of the National Center for LGBTQ plus rights, said in a statement announcing the lawsuit, "When the federal government can reach across the country into a hospital that has no connection to the court that issued the subpoena and pull a child's entire medical file out of the filing cabinet without so much as a phone call to the parents, every family in America should be concerned." According to publicly available copies of similar subpoenas cited in the complaint, the government is seeking documents sufficient to identify every patient who received the targeted care, including clinical assessments, diagnoses, treatment records, informed consent forms, intake paperwork, and parent or guardian authorizations. The families argue that the demands would reveal not only deeply personal medical information, but also the identities of parents who sought lawful health care for their children in states where such care remains legal. The government is demanding that a hospital hand over records identifying parents who made a private medical decision for their child in consultation with their doctors. Jennifer Levi, Senior Director of Transgender and Queer Rights at GLAAD Law, said in a statement, "Whatever one thinks about the underlying medical question, the principle that the federal government cannot compile targeted lists of families to advance political ends should be beyond dispute." At the heart of the lawsuit is the question of how much power the federal government has to obtain private medical information about people who are not accused of any crime. The families argue that the subpoena violates constitutional protections for informational privacy, infringes on the Fourth Amendment safeguards against unreasonable government searches, and denies equal protection by targeting transgender youth and their families for scrutiny that no other category of patients faces. The complaint also warns that allowing the subpoenas to proceed could deter parents from seeking medical care for their children and undermine trust in the doctor-patient relationship. The plaintiffs are seeking a temporary restraining order before Stanford's June 10th compliance deadline. They have asked the court to intervene by June 9th to prevent the records from being disclosed while the case proceeds. Our thanks to the advocate for providing LGBTQ plus news from an insider perspective. We're going to take another brief break. When we come back, we're going to share a story about the impact of rising inflation on grocery and gasoline prices and how that is affecting U.S. households. We'll be right back after these messages.